Welcome to Skipton Baptist Church Online. We are continuing our series that we just started recently called Practicing the Way, based on the work of John Mark Comer. And we are aiming to be with Jesus, become like him, and to do as he did. And to do that, we are digging into some of the practices that we see in the life of Jesus. And last week, we focused on the practice of prayer. And this week, we're focusing in on Sabbath. Now, there's a lot of advertising out there on TV, on media of all different sorts. And there's lots of different things. Things like the picture of the picture-perfect couple in a crisp, clean, lovely cotton bed, relaxedly drinking their hipster coffee in the morning with the dappled sunlight through the window. Or someone staring into the middle distance sunset on a bench. A picture-perfect picnic on a park with a tartan blanket, a wicker basket, and M&S quality Lunchables. The new sofa, the detergent, lawnmower, coffee, fluffy dressing gown, whatever. So much of the advertising around these things convey an image of idealism, an image actually of Sabbath. This is what they're selling. They're selling us Sabbath. Look at any of the magazines or curated social media posts. Marketeers and advertisers know that our soul aches for this kind of stopping in our lives. And because they want it too, they know it's a human need. But in order to experience that, ironically, they say you need to buy whatever they've got on offer with money earned from working hard to get that experience of Sabbath. Because there is an exhaustion to modern life. Ask someone how they are, and invariably there might be the answer, tired, worn out, fed up, whatever. And there are many reasons for that. Physically, we are not sleeping as well as we have in other generations. The busyness, overactive, overstimulated and full minds, the pace and quality of modern Western life, hurry, noise, 24/7 culture, living with worries around the cost of living, digital age, polarization in politics, radical individualism, and loss of community leading to loneliness. It's too much. We're not designed to be able to take all of that. This leads to almost like an obsession for being productive, producing all the time. We're more stressed than we've ever been before, and perhaps even more materialistic. One psychologist says that we are experiencing in our culture universal fatigue. And the writer A.J. Swoboda says we have become perhaps the most emotionally exhausted, psychologically overworked, and spiritually malnourished people in history. Does that sound vaguely like the world in which you're living in and maybe experiencing? You see, it's not just a physical or a social problem. At its heart, this is a spiritual problem. When we are busy, tired, and run down, it's pretty much impossible to be the best versions of ourselves. We love less. We are less patient, less kind, and ironically, less productive. We are just less. It's not how it's meant to be, either personally or culturally. So what can Jesus' lifestyle talk about this? And he addresses it in the whole area of Sabbath. The Sabbath is something which God exemplified. It was hardwired into humanity. It's commanded at least twice in the scriptures. It's warned through the prophets about not Sabbathing, and Jesus had to correct its use, and yet we still get it so wrong. And when we think Jesus came and says, I've come to give you life to the full, perhaps we immediately think we haven't got room for that in our schedule, not for any more, when actually what he means is living life more fully, his lifestyle. So the practice of Sabbath, it maybe is something that you're familiar with, the Sabbath, a day of rest, all that. Originally within Judaism, it was a Saturday. Latterly with Christianity celebrating the resurrection of Jesus, it became Sunday. And my experience of Sabbath days or Sundays, days of rest, I have to confess, are pretty negative. Perhaps yours are too. A whole list of nots. You shall not, you shall not, you shall not. I remember one time recently we were caught on. We were on holiday in France, and it was mine and my wife's anniversary. And we were driving around trying to find a restaurant that was open. And nowhere seemed to be open. And then we suddenly realized it was a Sunday. And we thought, oh, why isn't anything open on a Sunday? And we caught ourselves on realizing, actually, this is Sabbath. And we were unhappy with the fact that there was a day of rest. Now, perhaps you reflect that similar feeling about Sundays growing up in the church. I love church, but yet somehow the Lord's Day often seemed pretty boring. Not so now with 24/7 entertainment, Sunday trading, etc., etc. It's no longer necessarily boring, but I wonder if we've lost something in the practice of Sabbath, even in the church. As one day kind of matches every other day, constant bombardment of our attention, there's a pervading sense of restlessness. And this is where Sabbath comes in. And I'm not speaking from a place of strength. I own my hypocrisy in this. I know of my need for it. I know of my poverty in doing it. We need to Sabbath. We're just not great at it. Now, there's lots that we can say about Sabbath. We've spoken about this before not that long ago, and a lot of this will be following up on that. But what I find here in the life of Jesus in Genesis and the commandments is something about Sabbath which is meant to be life-giving. And we're going to look at 4 aspects, 4 lenses through which we should look at Sabbath. And the first thing is remembering what Sabbath originally meant. Now, Sabbath in the Hebrew originally means literally to stop. Way back beyond Jesus, beyond the 10 commandments, right back to Genesis chapter 2, it says, by the 7th day, God had finished the work he'd been doing. So on the 7th day, he rested from his work. He stopped his work. He blessed the 7th day and made it holy because on it he rested, stopped from the work that he had been doing. That word rested literally means to stop. God stopped. He freed humanity from the need to keep going. God stopped. Now let that sink in, because perhaps immediately you have, but I've got so much to do. God Sabbathed. People are relying on me. God Sabbathed. But I'm not that sort of person. I like to keep busy. God Sabbathed. 6 days to work, 1 day to stop. It's no surprise that every culture across the world orient time around a 7-day week pattern, one which is not formed by some astronomical system like the day, a month, or a year. This pattern is woven into the very fabric of who we are as people. We were and are not designed to keep going until we hit a wall. There is a rhythm in our lives which God has embedded within creation and within us for our benefit. And when we go against this rhythm, we feel the consequences of it, the least of which is mere physical tiredness. The philosopher H.S. Farmer said, when you go against the grain of the universe, you tend to get splinters. So on the negative side, if we ignore that inbuilt well-being valve called Sabbath, we are in danger of suffering the consequences. Also, to when we do Sabbath and actually bring it into our lives and we follow this pattern, we and those around us hugely benefit. Now, God included a provision for the Sabbath in the 10 Commandments, the core to what would make his people live as the people of God. And we read about it in the book of Exodus. And while it is law like the law of gravity. It just is. No negotiation. If you fight against it, you will face the consequences of it. Body, mental capacity, relationships, and in your spiritual connection with God. The Sabbath was a gift from God to us. And yet, notice this. Knowing we are so bad at it, God has actually had to command us to stop and take time out. Just how warped are we as people that we need a commandment to accept and enjoy a gift? In the 10 Commandments, if it was a pie chart, the one of Sabbath would take up 37% of the space. It is, in God's economy, as important to highlight Sabbath as it is not lying, not stealing, and not murdering. And yet this is the one commandment we seem comfortable bragging about breaking. I haven't heard much from people about bragging about the numbers of affairs or lustings or lies that they've been engaged with, but we will happily share about how many hours we put in. You see, work and busyness is almost like a currency of importance and significance today. How often when we speak to people and we ask, how are you? How was your week? Oh, so busy, just so busy, so much to do, so little time, busy, work, stress. I'm important, I'm needed, I'm valuable. Any other answer is met with a variety of responses. What might your or your listener's response be if they were told that a person had a regular, restful day off? That'd be nice. You're lucky. Not everyone can do that. It's nice for you. It's a mixture of incredulity, judgment, maybe even jealousy. I once spoke with someone who demonstrated this warpedness about business and talking to me about how they had to stop work because of the demands and the hours and the stress. He'd been working 55, 65 hours a week, and he told me that he would tend to meet people who said that they were full-time, working 35 to 40 hours, and he'd ask in his own mind, well, what do you do from Wednesday onwards? And that was his frame of reference. And when I refer to work, I'm not just talking about employment, paid or otherwise. It is the regular busyness of our weekly schedule, the things that we have to do. From our reading in Mark chapter 2, we see that Jesus is often in trouble with the authorities about Sabbath. It was one of the key distinctives of the Jewish people. And out of fear of breaking that fourth commandment, they'd established so many rules about what you could and couldn't do on the Sabbath. 1,500 rules plus, in fact. You couldn't prepare a meal, light a fire, walk more than a kilometer from your home. Yet Jesus healed on the Sabbath, cast out demons, picked corn, went hungry. In fact, when you read the Gospels, so often Jesus clashes with how he lived on the Sabbath. And it brings two extremes for us. There's the lax extreme, which is don't do it. There's no need. We're not under law. Don't think it's relevant or don't even need it. There's more important things to do with time. Or there's a legalistic response, which is rules upon rules of what we can and cannot do. And Jesus' answer is that he is the Lord of the Sabbath. He said the Sabbath was made for people, not people for the Sabbath. So for a first century Jew, they needed to hear the second part, that they were not made for the Sabbath. 21st century Christians need to hear the first. The Sabbath was made for us. God said, remember the Sabbath. And in this we remember that we are created by a loving creator to live within his good world. Remember that there is a built-in rhythm to creation and life and well-being. Remember that we are not a machine, a productivity device, but a person. Stop and remember. That's the first thing, that we Sabbath is to stop. But the second understanding of Sabbath is to rest. So we read that God rested. And so when we read that, do we think, was God tired from all his labor? Well, no, there's so much more to it than that. In Isaiah 40:28, it says, God does not tire. In Psalm 121, he neither slumbers nor sleeps. But for us, life is full on, and we are limited, finite beings. The gift of work due to the fall is warped into toil and tiring and resource sapping. We have our limits, and work is rarely, if ever, fully done. There will always be something else that needs doing, something else needing taking off our list. And it's ironic in the day and age of technology that we were promised decades ago with labor-saving devices and more time off. It's actually increased our busyness. The ping of our phone grabs our attention more than the person physically sat in front of us. And devices providing entertainment and enjoyment also is a means of carrying around our office with us, responding to our workload, digital emails that seem to batter our attention, advertising and social media blogs reminding us of the life we don't yet have, but we could do if we buy, and we have to work hard in order to do it. It's full on because it's never enough. One person uses as an illustration the Hydra from Greek mythology. You achieve one thing, you chop off one head, and there's two more things that pop up. So we are trapped in this. Are we restless or are we restful? Now, resting is not idleness. It's not laziness. It's not just lying around snoozing. It's more than a day off. On a day off, we still have multiple demands, catching up on chores and household errands that need doing. Rest from work, not just paid employment, but from all those other things. The thing is, we lack margin in our lives. Where are those margins? Think about a document. It always has space around the edges and spaces between words and lines and paragraphs. Imagine one without any of those. It would be too hard for us to kind of compute, to understand. Too much, hard to orientate, follow, easy to lose our place. And it's a picture of a life without margins. And the Sabbath is a place of rest and restoration from a previous week and recharging for the week ahead. It's interesting that at the very start in the story of creation in Genesis, in day 6, God creates humanity. The pinnacle of his creation. He steps back and says it's very good. And then he rests. So the first full day of humanity in the creation story is a day of rest, a day spent in the presence of God. Not rest as recovery from the wear and tear of work and struggle, but a place to work from. And I really want to highly recommend a guy called Tony Horsfall and a book he's written called Working from a Place of Rest. Working from rest, not working for rest. Unfortunately, I know a good number of people who literally work for their holidays, both to pay for them, and they end up reaching and just about crawling towards their time off. And then they rest, and then they're back on to the treadmill of work and hassle and stress in order to pay for the next holiday. You see, days of rest are not meant to be a reward, but a rewiring. And there's lots of re's when we think about that. Restore, revive, recover, reinvigorate, refresh, recharge. Lots of re's are about redoing, going back to something, restoring the default. Well, the default is a place of rest, a place of wholeness, of shalom. Psalm 23, one that we're really familiar with, talks about the Lord is my shepherd. It says in verse 2 and 3, it says, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. Soul restoring. It's a great picture of what Sabbath is about. How is your soul? Are you up for some soul restoring? Notice in that famous passage in Psalm 23, the most well known, that God has to make me lie down. I'm liable not to do it myself. And also he says he restores our soul. He has to make us lie down in order for us to stop. So how do we rest? How do we restore well? Well, I think we need to pay attention, be attentive to a sense of holistic rest. We've done a series on holistic a number of years ago, but based on Mark 12, where it says, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I think it was a really significant series because it captures so much of our lives if we really try to embrace it. And I would say, are we resting in our heart, in our emotional and relational situations with others? Are we resting in our soul, spiritual relationship with God? We'll get to that in a moment. Resting in our mind, our mental, stilling and filling our thinking of good things. Are we resting on our strength, physical rest, recovery, refueling and re-energizing? Is your Sabbathing attentive to those 4 areas? Because if not, part of your life is missing out on an aspect of rest. It's stopping working. It's stopping wanting. It's stopping even worrying. All these things will be on the other side of Sabbath. And in fact, we may well be in a better place to handle them in the light of having a Sabbath. But the thing is, it's not easy to have that stopping and that resting. And the deck is stacked against us. You may know that the command to rest, Sabbath, it occurs more than once. The second time in the 10 Commandments is given in Deuteronomy. It's to the next generation of Israelites 40 years after leaving Egypt. And the Sabbath command is slightly different. In Exodus, the original, the reason for Sabbath is to remember that God rested and it was rooted in creation. The second time around, it's rooted in the freedom from Egypt, remembering you were slaves, but you're not slaves any longer. Slaves who were driven by the excessive desire of Egyptian empire. And they were slaves in order to do what? To build storage cities, whole cities for excess production. And that systemic need to acquire and accumulate, which drives our work schedules, our aspirations, timetables, performance indicators, and our sense of innate worth and purpose. So to Sabbath is to go against that prevailing mindset and know that there will be some kickback. Sabbath shouts stop enough to this relentless pace of life and demands on our time. It's so countercultural. Walter Brueggemann, the Old Testament scholar, famously said that Sabbath is an act of resistance, a rebellion against drivenness and desire to acquire things and stuff, pursuing stuff that actually never fully satisfies. There will be external resistance. Our world is made in a way for us to not rest and restore. And there'll be internal resistance. Our own greed and desires will drive us on. Sabbath is a weapon used against these opponents. An entire day to stop, rest, and appreciate enough. And it's hence why gratitude is such a key part of the Sabbath pattern. So the third aspect of Sabbath, we've had stopping, we've had resting. The word Sabbath can also be translated as to delight in. Now, I don't know what your experience of Sabbathing has been. I've said that mine sometimes was pretty boring, and I like church and stuff. But there is that connotation that Sabbath is restrictive, whereas the original intent was of one of delight, of enjoyment, of celebration, and of satisfaction. Each day in the creation story, at the end, God stops, steps back, and sees that it was good. It was a sense of daily delight. 6 days you will labor and work, but on the seventh, Sabbath. It's important to note that work is meant to be good, and we see the importance of it, not just productivity-wise, but also about having a sense of purpose and identity. Work is good, but it's been warped. But it is inherently good, and so is stopping to see what you've done. We were privileged to be part of the SBC Workday over the summer, and all the work that went into transforming the front garden of the church. Now, it's not finished yet, but I remember at the end of the workday stopping, breathing, and taking in what has been done, and the sense of satisfaction at work done and something achieved led to delight. Sabbath was not meant to be negative or a dreary religious observance. It is and always has been intended to be a blessing, a gift for us to enjoy. Don't forget to rest as God intended. And so we should mark it out as something to celebrate. It was never meant to be boring. Even today, Jewish Sabbath is located around a shared meal. It's around feasting, not fasting. Dan Allender, a Christian counselor who wrote a book on the Sabbath, had this to say: the Sabbath is an invitation to enter delight. The Sabbath, when experienced as God intended, is the best day of our lives. Sabbath is the holy time where we feast, dance, play, have sex, sing, pray, laugh, tell stories, read, paint, walk, and watch creation in its fullness. Few people are willing to enter the Sabbath and sanctify it, to make it holy, because a full day of delight and joy is more than most people can bear in a lifetime, let alone a week. Now, those kind of things that he listed are meant to be activities which are meant to bring joy. They're not to-dos. Feasting, community, gratitude, play, love, nature, laughter, poetry, sunsets and downpours. It's an invitation from Jesus. And a weekly planned and protected Sabbath is not meant to be a dreary task, but a life-giving reminder that God's world, his creation, and what we have added to it on our work is meant to be enjoyed. Sabbath means to delight in the world, in our life within it and with others, and perhaps most significantly, to delight in God. That's the fourth aspect of Sabbath. Sabbath can be translated or understood in the sense of worship. Now, maybe you've listened to statistics and well-being movements and motivations that encourages us to work hard and rest well. And maybe you're really good at having your day or days off. But what do those days off consist of? Different set of tasks rather than your workplace? A drivenness? Another set of lists? Is it just vegetating in a recovery situation before the vicious cycle begins again with the alarm clock going off on Monday morning? This is not Sabbath, not really. John Mark Comer, whose book we base a lot of this on, his church came up with the word of Sabbath-ish or Sab-ish. Not really Sabbath, kind of that, but it's not quite. So it's great that some may well be looking after their time off, their days off, but there's so much more to Sabbath than that. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 3, it says, God blessed the seventh day and made it holy. A Sabbath day of rest is meant to include delight in the Lord. In other words, worship. Now, I'm not necessarily talking just about a sing-along a Hillsong session that lasts for 24 hours. God made the day holy. Now, that is a loaded word, I understand, but it literally just means set apart and special. Set apart for what? Well, it says set apart to or for the Lord. The Sabbath is to be located around the Lord, in Him and what He has done. A Sabbath to the Lord, stopping from in order to orientate ourselves with God, reconnecting with Him. The world in which we live and move and earn our bacon can twist and turn us, and our aspirations, our ideas and ideals, outlooks can be twisted and turned into its shape. And these need resetting, a little bit like sometimes when you feel like your body's just a little bit kind of twisted, and then you stretch or you twist, or you are stretched by someone, and things just click into line again and it feels right. Sabbath can do this, a reorienting of heart, soul, mind and body onto the Lord. It's why Sabbath originally included synagogue. Why it's the time of gathered worship in the church, not the only day, especially if Sunday can't be your day of rest, your day of Sabbath. What distinguishes Sabbath from a day off? It is particularly that it is focused in and around God. Worship is not an optional life choice, but a fundamental part of our Christian lives, and particularly it is a distinguishing feature of Sabbathing, a Sabbath rest, to delight in the Lord. I love the passage from Matthew chapter 11. In the Message, it says, are you tired, worn out, burned out in religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me and watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live lightly and freely. Sound good, doesn't it? That is the offer of that life in all its fullness. Augustine is often quoted, God, you made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it finds its rest in you. That is what needs to happen as part of our Sabbath time. So how do we do that? Well, the irony is that this day of rest requires effort. The writer of Hebrews in chapter 4 says, chapter 11, verse 11 says, let us therefore make every effort to enter into God's rest. Make every effort. In other words, it's going to cost us something. Going against the cultural flow of busyness and the encultured ideals and habits, it requires choice and intentionality. It doesn't and won't just happen. It requires planning and preparation. The Jewish example is get stuff done before sundown on a Friday, and then anything else that needs to be left behind. It needs to be practiced. Although it's inbuilt, it still feels unnatural. And then we also need to consider sharing the load in order for others to Sabbath too. It needs protecting, it needs defending from detractors and judgers, and also from our own tendency to drift. It's not meant to be legalistic or restrictive. It's meant to be a positive blessing. It's not meant to be about guilt or another thing to do. It's actually a better way to live. It's not a day off, great as they are. There's so much more. And it's not the same for everyone. Different personalities, schedules, commitments, seasons of life, school, homemakers, unemployed, unable, retired, full-time, part-time. And the thing is, start where you are at. Start small. There's no point having grand gestures. Think subtraction. What can I take away rather than add in? Knowing that you will get out of Sabbath what you put into it. Remember that it may well be harder than easier initially. because it's going against that grain of culture. And remember that no formation without repetition. It needs to be repeated and practice the practice. A Sabbath is an attitude, a way of being in the world which impacts the whole of our lives, a spirit of restfulness that comes from abiding in the Father's presence. Brueggemann quotes it again, said, people who keep the Sabbath live all 7 days differently. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Remember the Sabbath day. Remember within your days Sabbath moments where we take time to taste that rest from God. Critique our days off. Are they just sleeping in, or is your soul being restored? And if you had 24 hours to do whatever you could to restore and be blessed, to draw your attention to the Lord and abide in him, what actually would you do? Look through Sabbath lenses, to stop from work demands and wants, to rest, to restore your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength, to delight, to enjoy, to bless and be blessed, to celebrate and to feast, and to worship, to reorient our perspective on God and align with him, and to delight in him. Go ahead, have a rest, have a break, have a Sabbath.